Hello and welcome to Saints Live. I'm Steve Forbes, and today Southampton travel to the Amex to take on Brighton in what will be their penultimate game in the Premier League for another season at least. Now, joining me today we have former Saints captain Dean Hammond and NBC's lead soccer writer Joe Prince. Right, gentlemen, I hope you're both well following the outcome of last weekend. Dean, that defeat against Fulham has sealed Southampton's fate, relegation from the Premier League. Having had a week now to reflect on it, how do you feel about the club's situation?
Well, obviously disappointed, Steve. Sad after the game, and that it was a reality that Southampton were going to be relegated and not be in the Premier League next season, and then returning to the Championship after such a long and successful spell in the Premier League. But that's the situation now. It's what the club does to try and get back to the Premier League, because I'm sure everyone involved in the football club wants that as soon as possible. And they have a chance now to reflect, to look at things, what needs to be improved, what needs to be changed, what hasn't worked this season and why it hasn't worked, what good has come from this season, because there's always some good. You look at some of the players that were brought in and recruited, there's a positive there. There's some really good young talent at the football club. So how does that continue? How do we make those players better? How can they adapt to the Championship in preparation in returning to the Premier League? But also that Southampton now have a chance, because they know their fate and they know their reality. They've got a little bit of an advantage to start preparing for the Championship now, ahead of other clubs. And we have to use that. We have to make sure we get the right manager in place. I think that's the biggest thing now. I think making early decisions is really, really important in terms of who's going to be at the football club next year, what sort of budget the new coach is going to look at, what players the new manager wants to keep, what players the new manager wants to move on, what philosophy is he going to bring to the football club. Is there going to be a new culture? They're going to continue what's been going on. Is it going to be an idea of bringing younger players into the first team again to try and give them some experience towards the end of the season now to implement them for next year? So it's sad, because obviously personally understand how difficult it is to get to the Premier League from my time at the football club. So it's no easy task. It really, really isn't. But look, I believe that the club is in safe hands. I think it has good ownership. You've seen from the owners that they've tried to do good things, and it just hasn't quite worked out. They've backed the football club, they've put money into the football club, they've invested in the football club, and I hope that continues, because Southampton is a brilliant football club. It's got amazing history, it's got fantastic people there, and it will return to the Premier League, and we all want that sooner rather than later. So there's some really good young players within this group. Can we hold on to them? Can we bring in some Championship experience in terms of players and some Championship experience in terms of a manager? I think that's really important. Someone who knows the league well, but also someone who's going to bring the sort of playing style that we all want, the exciting Southampton that we want to see. That would be fantastic as well. So look, it's going to be a tough task, but the club is facing relegation, but I still believe is in a healthy situation. It can move forward from here.
Joe, I'm sure it was a tough weekend for yourself as well, personally being a lifelong Saints fan. But what went wrong in that game, that defeat to Fulham, in an attacking sense? Because Bernd Leno had a relatively quiet afternoon, and Southampton really kind of failed to make many clear-cut chances.
It did, Steve. I think if a sort of 90 minutes summed up a season, then this was pretty much it, to be honest. It was playing a little bit scared, playing not to lose like they have for most of the season. And as you're seeing here, just lacking real quality in the final third. I mean, it goes down to, no wins in the last 11 games. It's been a terrible run. And I just saw no freedom to really play, no belief and no confidence. And I said, the latter is understandable given the run they've been on, the season they've had, and sort of the last almost 18 months now we're looking at as a team, confidence has really been low. So the thing here we're seeing, though, is that there's no real combination play all season long due to the constant changes of managers, tactics, players coming in and out, especially in the attacking third of the team there. And that just really hasn't allowed any kind of fluidity in Saints' play or creativity. because players just aren't used to playing next to each other. It's simple as that. We're seeing loose passes, players making the wrong runs, and again, just not used to playing alongside one another. So, 14 goals this season from open play is the lowest in the Premier League. I mean, half of Saints' goals have come from set piece situations nearly. So that kind of tells its own story. And they're also the lowest scorers in the Premier League this season. So I think really not having that partnership and understanding in attack has hurt them all season long, Steve. And that is why they've been relegated from the Premier League. And it was a really hard weekend as a Southampton fan. We're seeing it here. Alcaraz just scoring, but then being chalked off for offside. And that pretty much summed up, I don't know how many times that's happened this season, the close balls, small margins, and it seems like Saints have been fighting an uphill battle all season long. So tough week for Saints fans, but Dean summed it up perfectly at the start there. They'll rebuild, get some experience for the championship. And I'm actually feeling pretty positive about next season, and now they can plan ahead and hit the reset button and get back to doing what we know they can do best, which is pushing for a top 10 finish in the Premier League. It's not going to be easy to get out of the championship, but I believe the owners have a very clear philosophy. They've put their money where their mouth is. They've invested in this squad. I'm looking forward to them doing it again this summer, and then we go again.
Yeah, well, there could be a number of changes to the lineup today, gentlemen. So the team news is coming up in less than 10 minutes' time now, but there's quite a lot to get through. We can see the players exiting the team bus there at the Amex. We know that Shea Adams, Armel Bella-Kotchap, Mo Salisu, Roman Perro and Juan Larios are all out injured. Sam Adosi's away with England's under-20s. He's unavailable. Tino Livramento is back in contention after over a year out injured. We're going to talk about more about him in a moment. And Ruben Sellers has hinted that some of the younger players could be involved, saying that Don Ballard, Kamari Doyle and Sam Amior have been training with the first team recently. So, Dean, Ruben said in his press conference that he's going to put out a side capable of beating Brighton, but with an eye on the future. What would you like to see from the lineup selected today?
Really difficult to say, to be honest, Steve. Like you say, a team that can compete against Brighton, because you're still playing for Southampton in the Premier League. You're still playing for the badge, for the honour of playing for the football club. So you want to put a team out that can win the game. Now, you need a balance as well, and be looking a little bit ahead to next year with players that are going to be here, really. So keep them involved, keep them happy, keep them eager to stay at the football club. It's a great question about the youngsters. I think that's the obvious path to go when you're in this situation and you almost got nothing to play for. But I'd be a little bit wary to throwing them straight in, personally, because we're already a young team. I've mentioned this before. And you don't want to kind of scar them too much. I think bringing them off the bench and giving them an impact and giving them some experience of the Premier League can be really good for them, can be part of their development. Them training with the first team, them travelling with the first team, them being around the dressing room, them experiencing a match day is really, really good for them and really important part of their journey. Would I start any of them? I don't think I would today. I think it could be a good idea maybe next week. When it's a home game, I think that would be something that would excite the fans as well and could build the atmosphere as well. But today, I think you're playing against a really good Brighton team, and I wouldn't make too many changes. I think I'd bring Bazunu back in because I think he's going to be the goalkeeper for next year. I think he's had his spell out, his time to reflect. I'd be tempted, but I'm not sure. I think this is me being overeager to bring Livramento back in, but I wouldn't want to cause any injuries or any problems for next year because, again, he's going to be a really, really important player. Adam Armstrong hasn't had much action, but I would bring him back in because I think in the Championship he is a quality player at that level and can score a lot of goals. So I'd want him to feel as though he's part of the future, he's part of next year. I'd want Stuart Armstrong to stay at the club because he's experienced. I would continue to play him. Obviously, the two midfield in James Ward-Prowse and Lavia, I would continue. And then I've mentioned it for a few weeks now. I would bring Mara in. I would play him. He is a natural goal scorer. He's a younger player. And again, I'd want him feeling as though I've got a big part to play next season. So I would probably bring those players back in. But it's great that the youngsters are part of it. But I would probably not start any of them, but depending how the game develops, depending how it unfolds, then I would look to maybe bring them in and get some Premier League experience because that would be great for them.
Yeah, Joe, what would you like to see? Is this an opportunity for Ruben to test the team that could potentially start in the Championship next year?
think so. I'd love to see an attacking lineup. I mean, Dean mentioned there nothing to lose, so just go for it. It really doesn't matter today. So I'd like to see some different things tried, and I think maybe the lineup will be based surely around which players are expected to be at the club next season. That just makes sense. Dean points it out perfectly. He gives some of those players an idea of how to play alongside one another, and then you get a head start for next season. So I mean, Brighton will come out and have a go. They always do. I mean, you watch their game against Newcastle midweek. They commit a lot of people forward. So I think on the counter-attack today, Saints will have a lot of opportunities. So I'm looking at Sulemana, Gineppo, maybe again another two players who could feature in the Championship next season. Do you play those guys for their speed and pace on the counter-attack? But I want to see the young players play. It's great to see Tino back. I'm with Dean. Don't push him too much. But if he can get through 30, 40 minutes, that would be ideal and brilliant. And then just that DNA of the club, really. Ruben's talked about it as well, having the young players involved around. In an ideal situation next season, you're probably going with 18 full professionals and then 5 or 6 young players from the academy who can make the step up and get more opportunities. And we saw that the last time Saints were out in the Premier League, how they brought on the likes of Ward-Prowse and Shaw and Chambers were just kind of making their way up on the bench for a lot of games. So, I'd love to see Saints finish the season on the high of a couple of wins, get some momentum. I think that's key for next season as well. We've seen it in the past when Newcastle were relegated a few years ago. They ended the season really well in the Premier League, and then they're like, okay, we've got some positive vibes here. We've got some players who can do some damage. Let's tweak things a little bit in the Championship and come straight back up and show them how good we are. So I think today getting a positive result, but most importantly, a positive performance with players who are going to be there next season. That's what I want to see from Saints, Steve.
Well, let's hear it from the manager now, as Ruben Sellers was asked what he said to his players following that defeat to Fulham.
What did you say in your first meeting this week to try and get the best out of them in these 2 games where ultimately it's not really going to matter?
Well, because it doesn't matter which kind of a sport you practice. The first thing is that you play for yourself and you train for yourself, and then you keep fit for yourself, you keep working in your mindset for yourself, and then you put yourself into the team, into a group of players that want to do things, want to play, want to do it together. So the first meeting, it was very simple. It's nothing new that we need to do it now, but when the fact that you cannot get anything from the table because it is what it is, it just comes into those things are even more important than ever, because you still need to play for yourself, need to be fit, need to try to keep your mindset, need to try to be free of any injury, and sometimes injuries come because you are not focused 100% in what you are doing. And this is the main thing. And then when you think about that, you think also about playing for a club, for the fans, for families that will go and support us on Sunday, for families that will come and watch the game against Liverpool, for the people that it is, and for the competition. And then you have enough arguments to go again.
That was Ruben Sellers there. Now, Dean, what do you make of his comments? Because I can imagine as a manager it must be tricky to keep the players' focus in a situation like this.
Yeah, it can be, Steve. It really can, but that depends on the individual. And what he says there about preparing yourself correctly is spot on, really, because you're a professional footballer. You're paid to be a professional footballer. You're paid to play for Southampton, and you're paid to be at your best as you possibly can in terms of preparation. So he's completely right there. And it is about playing for your football club, playing for your personal pride, playing for your family, and playing for the fans that have supported you all year long, and they're going to be there next year as well, supporting you as well. So it's really difficult, but you have to move on as quickly as you can. You really do, and obviously be aware that the fact that whoever the manager is going to be there next season, I'm sure there's been private discussions on already. So whoever's coming in, whether it's if Ruben Sellers gets a job or someone else gets a job, they're going to be analysing you. They're going to be forming an opinion on you, and they're going to be watching games now and watching previous games. So as a player, you want to do everything you possibly can to prove that you're worthy to stay at the club, to prove that you're a good player, to prove that you are going to be part of the forward journey of this football club. So you have to be aware of that. definitely. And you've got to play to win. You're playing in the Premier League. Like I said last week, some of these players may never get this opportunity again, and you have to be aware of that.
Dean, on that, we will find out who has got the opportunity to play in the Premier League right now, because I'm sorry to interrupt you, but the team news has just come in. So there are 3 changes for Southampton. James Bree is in for Ainsley Maitland-Niles, Moi Elianusi in for Stuart Armstrong, and Joe Aribo is in for Paul Onuachu. Also, Tino Livramento is back amongst the substitutes, and B-team regulars Don Ballard and Kamari Doyle have been named on the bench. So here's Southampton's starting 11 in full. Alex McCarthy is in goal. Then we have James Bree, Jan Bednarek, Lianco, Carl Walker-Peters, Romeo Lavia, our captain James Ward-Prowse, Moi Elianusi, Joe Aribo, Theo Walcott, and Charlie Alcaraz. And on the substitutes bench for Southampton today is Gavin Bazzuno, Duje Shaletta-Sarr, Tino Livramento's back, Ainsley Maitland-Niles, Stuart Armstrong, Kamari Doyle, Kamaldeen Sulemana, Paul Onuachu, and Dom Ballard. Now, Dean, as I so rudely interrupted you, will come to you first. What do you make of this lineup?
Surprising, to be honest, Steve. But I think Ruben's picked a team that he believes that can compete against Brighton. So he's isolated the game. He's playing the individual game. Maybe he's not looking too far forward into next season. He's more concentrating on the performance today. More of a solid team, I would say. I think James Bree coming back in is not a surprise because of him as a player, just the fact that he hasn't been part of things, but he could have been training very, very well. He could feel as though he needs the opportunity, but also he could feel that, he could be a really important player next season because he's played in the Championship. He was a very, very good player at Luton, and maybe he deserves that chance. Aribo coming in, again, hasn't really been part of things. He came in a few weeks ago and got a start, but then we haven't seen him since. So, again, is a surprise. But a team that can compete against Brighton. There's lots of Premier League experience there. And it looks like he's gone for players that potentially that he trusts and that can put a really diligent, disciplined performance on against a Brighton team. So not as much flair that probably me and Joe wanted in the attacking areas, not as much pace, not as much creativity, but quite a solid team. Probably a team that's going to be difficult to break down and maybe stay in the game and try and frustrate Brighton and then make some substitutions late on to impact the game and change the game. So it will be interesting to see. But yeah, I wouldn't have personally picked that team myself.
What about you, Joe? Would you have personally picked it? There's also a couple of players that could get a Premier League debut today.
Yeah, no, I think it was always going to be a weird team, right? It's a weird situation. You're down. There's not much to play for. So obviously the mainstays, Lavia, Ward-Prowse, Carl Walker-Peters are there. Yeah, it's just interesting because there's a few players there that may not be at Saints in the summer are actually starting. So it kind of goes against what we were saying before the lineups came out to play players that you think are going to be there next season. So, we don't know, do we? We don't know the plan long term right now. So it really was a bit all over the place in terms of trying to predict this team. But yeah, I like obviously on the bench, Kamari Doyle and Don Ballard. Potentially getting a run out in the Premier League, and obviously great to see Tino back on the bench as well. But yeah, I think Alcaraz, Lavia just kind of shows the leadership that they have in this team already as really young players and the standing that they have. And I'm a big fan of Joe Aribo. I just think he's been really unlucky with different managers coming in. He's been in and out of the team, the philosophy. Did he ever really fit into the system Saints wanted to play this season? I'm not sure. Yes, he had to do more with the chances he was given, but I think he's a quality player. He showed that for Rangers and in their run to the Europa League final. So I'm excited to see him and excited to see that maybe some of these players we thought may move on in the summer. Maybe they might be at Saints a little bit longer than we thought. So that will help them in the Championship. So, in conclusion, there's a lot going on there, and let's see how it all plays out.
Joe, you did mention Tino Livramento there. He's been out for quite some time, back on the bench today. Great to see him fit again, and he's a player that could be pivotal next year in the Championship.
Oh, without a doubt. I mean, arguably, probably Saints' best player last season behind James Ward-Prowse, and the fact that he's been missing for 13 months, it's a huge boost. That fingers crossed all goes well in these last few games and he'll be ready and firing all cylinders for next season. it'll be really emotional to see him come back today if he does come on to the same site where he had that horrible injury against Brighton. But I mean, the fans love his marauding runs. He got his song. It's easy to forget just how good he was when he burst through. I mean, we were all at this game against Burnley when he scored his first goal and went close, and it's just brilliant. And what I love about him is going forward. Yes, he's exciting to watch. He gets up and down the right flank, but also defensively, he puts in a real shift. He's always covering. He's always really good on one-on-one defending. I think, as we're seeing there, it's excellent. And what that did allow as well is Carl Walker-Peters to play at left back and then offer Saints basically exactly the same down that flank. So it was Tino and the team that really made Saints stronger down both sides of the pitch from the fullback position. So, I mean, yeah, if he stays injury-free over the summer, I'm not exaggerating here. I think he's got the potential to be the best player in the Championship next season. I really rate him that highly. I think obviously he was breaking into the England under-21 team and becoming a regular for them just before that unfortunate injury. So what a player, Saints fans' favourite, and I'm really excited and happy that he's back today, and hopefully we see him for a good period today and then in the final game of the season against Liverpool.
Yeah, indeed. Well, another highly rated youngster is Charlie Alcaraz, Dean. He starts again today. He scored 4 goals in 11 Premier League starts since joining in January. Obviously missed the opportunity to add to that tally with the offside goal against Fulham, but he's almost undroppable at the moment. How important could a player like him be in the Championship next season?
He's been so impressive, Steve, and almost Ruben Sellers has kind of created a formation to keep him in the team, really. He's so effective, scoring 4 goals in 11 starts is really impressive. And when he gets those opportunities, he's really clinical. He's a very, very good finisher. And he seems to be very composed and calm in those situations, doesn't panic. It looks very, very natural to him. And we forget that he's 20 years old and he's come to a different country, a different culture, a completely different environment. And he's settled so quickly. Look, good performances and goals really help with the confidence, but it's the midfield runs that I love and the timing of the midfield runs. That goal against Leicester is brilliant. Injuring himself in the celebrations is not a great idea, but the run was fantastic. He takes his strikes really early, so the goalkeepers are not quite prepared. This one against Arsenal, again, is brilliant. He's really confident and really willing to take that responsibility on in those areas. And what I like about him as well, Steve, he's quite aggressive. He's got a bit of fight about him. He's got a bit of bite about him. And I wouldn't want to stop that at all. And he's very, very fit, very energetic. This goal against Nottingham Forest, playing on the counter-attack and allows himself to have that touch and then just calmly slots it into the goal. And that's a lot more difficult than it looks. Believe me, I've been in those situations and definitely missed from that situation as well. So, look, as a former midfield player, I can really appreciate him. He's been very, very impressive. So I hope the club can keep hold of him because he's a real talent. And I think he will grow on to be a brilliant player for Southampton and be really effective in the Championship and then return to the Premier League with a football club. I think he'll continue to improve and grow as a player. He's been a real find. And one of those positives I talked about at the beginning of the show of this season, the recruitment of him in January was very, very good.
Yeah, he's a very impressive young footballer, is Charlie Alcaraz. Now, Joe, here's a stat that you or maybe some of our viewers watching might not know, but in the last 12 meetings between Southampton and Brighton, the home team has never won. And the Amex has actually been a happy hunting ground for the Saints in the Premier League.
Great stat, Steve. And yeah, I think it's sometimes difficult to explain why that is, right? I think both these teams want to attack and be on the front foot for the most part over the last few years. And as we're seeing this, some brilliant goals. And I think this is one that Saints fans always really look forward to. I've been in the away end myself at the Amex, and it's a nice little trip down to Brighton from Southampton. It's easy to get to. And obviously a bit of rivalry there, given the League One and Championship days as well. So, yeah, I think it's interesting to me that Saints always seem to do quite well against Brighton. Great goal from Gineppo, by the way. And I think it's that what we said about earlier, that no matter who the manager is, the last few managers, Potter, De Zerbi, they commit players forward. They leave a lot of room on the counter-attack. So Saints have done well there away from home, I think, for that reason, because they've been patient and from set-piece opportunities or On the counter attack, they've been clinical. So I'd love to see more of that today. Yeah, I'm just thinking back to my journey as a Saints fan. I went to the Withdean as well. I'm pretty sure there was a long jump pit and a running track in between the away fans and the pitch. And the Amex is definitely gone to the next level. And yeah, I'd love to see Will Prowse go to the next level today and, equal or even overtake that Premier League free kick goal scoring record down at the Amex. But 2 great strikes here last season to rescue a point for Saints, and seeing that away end go up like that behind the goal just makes me wish that I was in there with Dean and giving it the big one. So hopefully those Saints fans down there today will have plenty to celebrate in the away end at the Amex.
Yeah, it would be superb to see that today. Hopefully the stats are in our favour. Now, Dean, when Saints met Brighton in the Premier League in December, plenty of attacking intent, 13 shots in total for Southampton, which was more than Brighton's. But yet again, we've bemoaned a lack of goals this season, and again, there was just a failure to convert those chances on the day.
Yeah, Steve, it's a great example in that, and you used the word perfectly. There was a lot of intent from Southampton. We were getting in good opportunities in good areas, good crossing areas. But each time you look at these highlights, Samadozi on the day was really, really bright and very, very creative. But we're not getting enough players in support. We're not getting enough players in attacking areas to be able to combine. Joe mentioned it at the start of the show. You have to be able to combine with players. Those quick passes, the movement, the overlaps, and didn't quite happen on the day, but wasn't from lack of effort. All season Southampton have tried. The effort's been there, the willingness to try and win games. Just probably the lack of quality, if we're completely honest, at this level, just hasn't quite been there. Samadozi there, really, it's a great pass from Stuart Armstrong, and he just has a heavy touch with his left foot. If he cushions that a little bit better, he gets a strike off and doesn't have to twist and turn. Here again, Samadozi, the set, he has to have an extra touch, which allows Lewis Dunk to be able to get the block in. So the endeavour there, the effort's there, just not quite the quality. And on the day, losing 3-1, I believe it was, against a good Brighton team who've had a really good season, better than a really, really good season. But Samadozi on the day was very, very good, and is a player, I know Joe's going to talk about it in a minute, but is a player that can be really effective in the Championship. He's a player that was favoured under Nathan Jones, but hasn't really under Ruben Sellers. We've seen a little bit of him again lately, but he has the ability to take players on, to be excited, and again, to be a really important player for Southampton next year.
Well, Joe, Dean's teed you up there perfectly, talking about the bright spark that was Samadozi that day. He's away with the England under-20s team today, but he is a player that I'm sure we all can agree on that would be a handful for Championship defences.
Yeah, really looking forward to seeing him play for the England under-20s tomorrow. I believe it's their first game in that competition, so intrigued to see how he does. He's still just 20 years of age, very young player. And skill-wise, I think he's right up there with the most talented players at Saints. He kind of reminds me of Robert Pires, the way he just goes past players. He's pretty flat-footed. You think, oh, is he that quick? And then we're seeing there to win a penalty. Before you know it, he's passed 2 or 3 defenders with just a little shake of the hips, and just brilliant, really. It's kind of an ability. I don't think you can teach that. It's almost like a innate ability for him to beat players in the way that he moves past them. Dean mentioned, I think the main area of improvements for him next season would be end product, and maybe just withstanding the physicality of a league like the Championship. Didn't have any goals or assists this season for Saints, but I think it will have done him good this season, Steve, to have all these experiences in the Premier League. And we're seeing he came so close. Saints have been so good all season at, and for years now, winning the ball up high at the pitch, but then not just capitalizing in the final third with quality plays. So they can get him on the ball as much as possible. Next season, we're seeing here the combination play was really good, getting a good run in the team alongside a settled group of individuals. Then I think he can be really, really dangerous. And again, hats off to the club for their recruitment, because this one has really looks like it's going to work out long term in the future. And he has fallen out of favour recently, a bit surprising to see, because Saints have needed that bit of creativity in the final third. But along with Sulemana, Nathan Teller potentially coming back next season, some really exciting wide players for Saints. And I think the challenge for Aduz is, can he start? And then how does that balance look? And if he nails down a starting spot, that means that he's beaten out some really good, talented young players there out wide. And I just want to see who is he combining with in the final third. Is it Shea Adams? Is it some new players? Alcaraz, if he's still there. But I think there's potential there for a really good quartet, Steve, and a doozy. Hopefully, he plays really well at this U20 World Cup, comes back with a lot of confidence, and then hits the ground running this summer.
Yeah, most definitely. Well, there's about 45 minutes to go until the action gets underway at the Amex, gentlemen. So we'll get your final thoughts and those score predictions. Dean, how do you see today going?
Well, tough game against a brilliant Brighton team, especially at home this year. They've been very, very good. Play a really attractive form of football. So it's going to be a tough test. But I'm hoping the fact that, Southampton now are relegated, they understand that. There can be a bit more freedom in their play. They can play with that, express themselves a little bit more. And that can happen in these situations. So I'm hoping that's the case today. And there's a bit more pressure on Brighton that want to win and still getting those European spots. So I'm going to go for a 2-1 Southampton win, a 2-1 surprise Southampton win, but a good performance, a good solid performance. And yeah, a 2-1 Southampton win, which would be good. And put a smile on all our faces.
Okay, that's really interesting. Joe, do you think this is an opportunity for Southampton to play with a bit less weight on their shoulders?
I think so, Steve, and I think we've seen that at times this season, right? When the team can express themselves, then there are individual players there that can really put in great performances. I think it's a benefit that obviously Brighton played away at Newcastle on Thursday, and then Roberto De Zerbi's been talking a lot about their injuries and they're having to roll out the same players time and time again, and they've been catching up a lot of games recently as well. So I think it might be a good time to play them. I don't know if their energy levels will really be there. But this is a big game for them, obviously. If they win, they guarantee themselves European football for the first time ever. So it's a big, big day for Brighton. I think that sets up quite nicely for Saints to be the spoilers and to hit Brighton on the counter. I was going to go for a draw, but you know what? Last away game of the season. Dean's called it 2-1 for Saints. So I definitely will go with that one as well. So a big away win for Saints.
Okay, we're in agreement. 2-1. Lovely stuff, gentlemen. Thank you so much, Joe and Dean, for joining us on Saints Live. Not long to go now until kick-off at the Amex between Brighton and Southampton, with the Saints hoping to, conclude the Premier League season, these final two games, on a positive note. Either way, we'll all be back on the final whistle, where Joe and Dean will be dissecting the action for us. So enjoy the match, and we'll see you then.